off my light energy, run that back, get your own. I'm emotionally gifted, so I must guard that gift with wisdom and firmness. My openness is emotionally generous. I must be watchful. I'm seeing who are and aren't skilled to receive. I receive what others' blind spots are, teaching me about budgeting my energy and setting the boundaries. I have the right to tell people what they don't want to hear in the name of setting the boundaries. I also won't exhaust myself on people who ain't listening. I'm done with people pleasing and the attachment to make everyone happy with me. I won't share like how I used to share. I people wiser. I know now people pleasing isn't love, but it is fear. I am magnificent at releasing expired emotional ties to how I structure my life with people, knowledge, money, friends, nutrition, health of my body, love, and time. I'm free from over-explaining and justifying my choices. My cutoffs aren't personal, they're spiritual. Anyways, I call back all energy that belongs to me. I am not the caretaker of those who want to stay asleep. I release the programming of being overly responsible for the happiness of others. The divinity in me, you know what's up. Tell me who I should share my intimate energy with. I focus my energy on who sees me.
Welcome, everyone. I am so grateful that you are all tuning in with us today. And if you're catching the replay of this, welcome to you as well. My name is Dr. Eliana Ramirez. I am a social worker and a queer Chicana who's in lands that were initially cared for and unceded by the Tamian Nation in California. My pronouns are she, her, and it is an honor to be with you this afternoon, evening, or morning, wherever you might be. We've got an incredible panel for you this evening, and we will be introducing ourselves in just a moment, and some of our panelists will be coming in a few minutes as well. So I just want to invite everyone throughout this 90 minutes together to do what you need to do to feel comfortable and settled in your body. So if it's, stretching, drinking water, petting a cat, whatever it might be, to help your nervous system feel as attuned and comfortable and settled as possible. I would like to go around our box here and just introduce ourselves. Jasmine, can we start with you, please?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jasmine Pierre. I'm the creator of the Safe Place app. The Safe Place app is a mental health app for the Black community, and we talk about how racism impacts the mental health of the Black community and why we have less access to mental health resources. And I really wanted to be on this panel today because I am a mental health resource, and I feel like this topic is very important.
Thank you, Jasmine. It's really an honor to have you here. And if folks who might have seen some of our previous interviews, you and I have been doing LinkedIn Lives now for several months. So thank you again for joining us today. Jaya, let's go to you, please.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jaya Malik, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm located in the Seattle area, and I am a consultant and coach from Jaya Malik Coaching and Consulting. I facilitate a program called the Active Allies Program, which helps those who are seeking to get out of bystander status and become upstanders in authentic allyship practices, do so and make that transition. Previously, before I started my coaching and consulting practice, I was a DEI leader at Amazon, Meta, and most recently Tandem Diabetes Care. I deeply care about this topic, not just because I think that Black women in particular are targeted with this special type of discrimination and harassment, but also because I think especially now more than ever, but always, we should stand in solidarity with Black women. And so I'm really looking forward to discussing this topic today. So thanks for having me, Helena.
Thank you, Jaya. And just huge flowers of gratitude to you, Jaya, for the ways that you have collaborated on building this panel, the survey that we put out, which we'll be talking about in a few minutes, and the process that you went through with me as we dealt with some trolling and other nastiness. So thank you so much, Jaya, for being just an amazing collaborator here. And last but certainly not least, the amazing Dr. Jen Self. Welcome, Dr. Self, if you would please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, I can go by Dr. Jen Self or the Dr. J or just Jen, please, whatever you'd like to call me. I have a couple of different projects that I want to talk about, but first, I've finally decided the way I want to introduce myself is that I am just a professional troublemaker. That is just what I'm doing. I'm out here making trouble. And I know that I'm on the panel with a bunch of other troublemakers, which is great. I think that's what we need to be aiming for, actually, in a world where trouble means being anti-racist. Trouble means everyone's a human. Trouble means that we don't try to control people's bodies. So I feel grateful to be here with you, Jasmine, and you, Jaya, and to meet you both and to be part of this panel. So thank you.
I'm going to be taking deep breaths throughout this 90 minutes together. You might see me moving my body sometimes like this. That's me actually settling my nervous system. And I would invite you as panelists and as audience members to be aware of how your body is feeling over the next 90 minutes. And if you start to feel kind of tense and constricted, or if your mind is starting to kind of go off in another place, just to know that might be an indicator that moving around a little bit, drinking some water, or feeling the seat underneath you, the ground underneath you, these things can help to settle the nervous system. And I think it's really important to welcome everyone who has logged in. Thank you so much for being here. I see Dan, Rupi, Ilona, hello, welcome, Angela, Ben, Bree. It is... It's an incredible feeling to be part of this community on LinkedIn who is committed to anti-racism. We are imperfect beings who make mistakes and hopefully learn from them and do better along the way. And I just want to acknowledge that everyone who has come here today has put time aside to be here to think about how we can be interrupting misogynoir when we see it. And I'm seeing one of our colleagues, Dr. Jade Singleton, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. If you would please go to the calendar invite and click the StreamYard link, that'll bring you into our platform. It's kind of funny with LinkedIn Live. It seems like we would log in through LinkedIn, but we did something a little sneaky, which is we're logging in through StreamYard. I'm so grateful that you're here. Erin, welcome to you. Judge, welcome to everyone who's here. I want to start by acknowledging that there are so many existential crises right now that are going on in the world. There's a lot of pain happening in the United States and abroad. And I want to acknowledge that we're having this conversation about how to interrupt misogynoir, which is the intersection of racism and sexism against Black women through images and through text, oftentimes online or in the media. We're centering this conversation tonight, not because it's more important than anything else that's happening in the world, but because Black women matter. And for all of us who are part of this online community, we all have an opportunity, and I would say a responsibility, to be stepping up to ensure that Black women are not the only people who are speaking out against misogynoir online. So I just really want to acknowledge that in addition to there being many existential crises that are happening right now in the world, that you chose to be here. And as we're here tonight, my invitation to you is to allow yourself to tune into what our incredible panel is going to be sharing with you. If you have a comment to put in the chat, you're welcome to. I'm going to actually invite you to try and post that comment as a question. So that way you're leaning in with curiosity. After the panelists answer 3 questions, then we'll have a period where we're going to invite people we're going to have the panelists answer as many questions as we can from the chat. So I want to let you know that. The other piece is, as a social worker, I strive to create trauma-informed and wellness-oriented, thank you, Sean Ginwright, for this idea of wellness-oriented events. And to do so, in part, means to let you know what you can expect and to be transparent. So we put together a survey for Black women on LinkedIn to ask what what the experiences are like of people who attempt allyship and sometimes harm, or sometimes help, or sometimes create a combination of those two. And some trolls got a hold of the survey, and there were people that were in an 8-hour period flooded the survey with a whole bunch of hoo-ha. So Jai and I have spent some time pulling out the hoo-ha and getting down to these precious gems. The feedback that we received from 26 Black women on LinkedIn who answered these questions, and we'll be sharing some of that information with you. But because we are now being followed by some trolls, I just want to let you know that we have created an anti-racist troll harm reduction approach to this event. There are 2 chat monitors who are in LinkedIn who are watching the chat to ensure that if anyone goes in there and puts any hoo-ha in there, that they're going to handle that. I'm telling you this as an audience so you can feel relaxed as much as possible to pay attention to the panel and not what's happening in the chat. Believe me, we have 2 very fierce chat monitors who are going to handle it as soon as they need to. One thing that's really important, if somebody puts some hoo-ha in that chat, please do not engage it. Don't respond to their post. Don't do a thumbs up or thumbs down or laughing face or anything like that. And the reason why is because the more people who interact with that post, the more it's going to go to the top of the feed. My hope is that any hoo-ha that ends up in that chat moves out of your view as quickly as possible so you don't have to deal with it. Okay, so just putting that out there so that we can ensure that people feel as comfortable as possible. Now, because we are humans and all of us have different experiences and opinions, we might say something that causes offense, or you might see something in the chat that has caused offense. We have created an incident feedback form because we really do want to hear from you if things are done that kind of go the wrong way. We're going to do a second panel discussion that's going to be kind of like a workshop where we're actually going to get into the nitty-gritty of how to engage Misogynoir in real time. And so when you fill out that incident feedback form, my guess is that there are going to be incidents that we could process together in that second panel. Okay, so our incredible chat monitors, Christine Carino and Dr. Ruth Diaz are going to be the people who will drop the link into the chat for you to let you know where that incident form is. And they're the people who are going to put reminders into the chat if we have anyone trolling us. Okay. All right. So with that, I also want to just shout out to the 26 Black women who contributed to that survey. But also, this is an event, and our resource guide, it really is a labor of love from a very sizable community. There are many people who've contributed to reviewing our survey, to sending the survey out, to helping us build this panel and give feedback along the way. And on the last page of our resource guide, you'll see all of those names listed. Okay, Jasmine, Jaya, Jen, the 3 J's. Anyone want to add anything else of housekeeping before we get started here?
I just forgot to say my pronouns in the beginning. She, her. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. All right, amazing people. Well, let's get into it if we can here. So we've all kind of like introduced ourselves just a little bit. And I'd like to get into our panel questions. The first question, and we'll just go through each person per question, and then we'll move to the next question. And I am going to, while you all answer this question, I'm going to send the link to this event to Dr. Singleton through LinkedIn. So we'll get her in here too. Okay, so the first question, we'll go to Jasmine first. Should non-Black people ask, okay, let me back up and say this. When we were planning this event, I put a post out and I was like, hey, I think maybe we should talk about us, for those of us who are non-Black people, how to actually interrupt misogynoir on LinkedIn, because we are seeing an increase in misogynoir with the presumptive nomination of Vice President Kamala Harris. This is not a political event. unless you're a Black feminist or a Chicana feminist, of which I am. So it actually is a political event, but it's not political in like big P political. This is political in the sense that we have to be, I think, engaging misogynoir. So the idea of this event, I put it on LinkedIn, a whole bunch of people gave feedback, said, yeah, they were excited about it. I was like, great, where are the moments that are hard to actually interrupt misogynoir and racism? What do you feel in your body? What are the things that come up? And so many of the questions for our panel actually come from all of you, the audience. So thank you for having engaged in that way. So this first question, hey, look at this. All right, we've got the amazing Dr. Jade Singleton. Welcome.
I found my way. Can you hear me?
You're coming gorgeous. We can hear you great. You look amazing. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much. So happy to be here.
Dr. Jade, I have been a fan of yours with the Iconi Collective. I've read your dissertation, which is amazing. I wonder if you might introduce yourselves to folks, please.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. So I'm Jade Singleton, and I did a dissertation on corporate gaslighting that people like and think is really entertaining, which shocked me, right? And I also am a co-founder of Iconi Collective. And Iconi Collective, in a nutshell, is basically like an EAP, the Employer Assistance Program for Black women.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, so we're going to get into it. We're going to do some of our questions. So the first question comes from an audience member who is a non-Black person who said, how do you kind of determine the difference between attempted allyship and the line of becoming an inappropriate savior? So this first question, it will go to everyone. We'll go to Jasmine, then Jaya, then Jen, then Jade. All four J's. Yes, Andrea McCoy, thank you for that, pointing it out. And, you know, just to invite the audience to be aware of how their answers might be different based on their positionality, if they are a non-Black person or if they're a Black person. So we'll start off. Here's the question. Should non-Black people ask a Black woman who is targeted if she wants you to speak up? So this is like if you're in an online place or in the workplace and a misogynoir comment or action is done or image is shared. Should the person who is non-Black ask a Black woman first if she wants them to speak up?
My answer is yes, because me personally, I don't always like people speaking for me. And sometimes I'll give you an example. There was one time I was in a corporate meeting and there was only 2 Black people there. It was me and another Black woman. And there was this other guy there, and he just started speaking up about like how he's proud that there's 2 Black women here, and like finally we have more diversity and stuff, but we never asked him to. It made it awkward because there was nothing about that conversation going on, and he just kind of blurted it out. Like it just made us feel like really weird. So he didn't ask us if we wanted him to say that. And it just rubbed us the wrong way, because I don't know, sometimes I feel like white men feel like they can speak up for anybody, and they just don't have the right to do that. So when stuff like that happens, I just kind of get angry because I'm like, I didn't ask somebody to speak up for me. So in the case of somebody like wanting to speak up, I would go to that person first and see if like she wanted, if she wants that to happen, because a lot of times they'll speak up for us and we didn't ask for it first. And it's very frustrating.
Thank you for that, Jasmine. Jaya, would you like to answer the question?
Sure. And I appreciate, Jasmine, your perspective. And unfortunately, I think that that's too common of an occurrence that we see happening. I think that the perspective I have, you're right, is, it's a little bit different, but it's also because of the positionality that I have of being a non-Black woman of color. So for me, I think that if I see harm happening in the moment, then I'm going to speak up. And so, there have been instances, especially when I was in a corporate setting, where I would see someone being gaslit in front of me or somebody being chastised in front of me. If that's happening, I'm going to speak up. because regardless of, I think that especially because I am not Black and I am in the position that I am, that is my responsibility to assert whatever positionality I have, to speak up, to say something, to question what's happening, to break the line of thinking that might be dominating that conversation. And so it really is my responsibility to use whatever privilege I may have available at my disposal, whether that's positionality through my title, whether that's positionality through whatever society, like social hierarchy we've got going on in that room. I will say that the reason why I said that, like, there's some like context here is also because I've been in positions where, especially when I've led DEI functions, where after the fact, for example, I may be speaking with a Black woman who will come to me and say, such and such happened, XYZ happened. And in that case, I think it's really important to defer to the individual and to honor what their need is. And because that's where you cross the line where it can become more like saviorism, where it's regardless of what you want to do, I'm not going to honor your wishes and I'm just going to go and try and save the day. Instead, I say, what's most helpful or what's most supportive to you right now? Because in reality, they may have processed it and said, I kind of want to go have this conversation on my own, or I could use your assistance, or would you facilitate and be like a bridge in this conversation? But it's really important to honor their wishes.
Thank you, Jaya.
Sure.
Jen.
Yeah, thank you. This for me, this is really like contextual. So if I have relationships with the people or the person, then I probably know what they might want me to do in that situation, because we've had conversations about it when it's not in the moment of the attack or the racism or whatever is happening in the moment. So I think about that with the people I know around me. And then I think also, like, I want to live in a world where that's not happening. So I have a vested interest in this. This is not just about like, yes, this person has been harmed, but that is not, I don't need to save that person. I know that Black people have been building and saving themselves and saving this country and doing all sorts of things for hundreds and hundreds of years. So I know that I don't need to do that for that person. What I think I do need to do is do that for the space and have a buy-in that's mine. And I do have a buy-in that's mine. I know what I'm doing and why I'm doing it and how it matters to me, and it's not about saving anybody around me. So I think that's how I often come at it.
Thank you, Jen. Jade.
Yeah. So I agree with that, in that I don't think anyone can actually just own this issue on its face. This actually belongs to all of us. If you're in America, anti-Blackness affects you, has affected you, even if you're not able to directly say, I'm a Black person and this has direct impacts to me. It has literally impacted us all, and it has caused a lot of collective and shared trauma that people just don't feel comfortable acknowledging, which is why we keep perpetuating the same cycle. So I might be an outlier in that I think that if you are hearing an anti-Black sentiment, I do expect you to speak, because I don't own the anti-Blackness or the buffer for anti-Blackness. I didn't create anti-Blackness. My people didn't create anti-Blackness. So I kind of feel like you can also speak. You're a part of this ecosystem. And however you feel like speaking, that's fine. I think the issue is when you're centering or calling a narrative as your own. That's when I have a problem with repeating narrative storytelling that's not your story. Sharing your own story, perfectly fine with me. And my favorite person that does this is Jane Fonda. If you ever have a second, look up Jane Fonda talking about her relationship with her father and how anti-Blackness crept into her life at a very young age. That belongs to them. That was an incident that impacted and shaped her life as a white woman. She owns that. and her speaking about that narrative is her own. So I think that's where I would kind of draw the line and make the distinction.
I really appreciate that point, that there are some examples of non-Black people who are using their own story as that entry point into anti-racism. I really appreciate also, Jasmine, what you were saying about a situation was it a workplace that happened?
It was a meeting, yeah.
It was a meeting, and just randomly some white guy started to point out that
there were the only 2 Black people there. Yeah,
like that
diversity. I was like, this is so weird right now, because it had nothing to. I mean, this is like a work meeting, and he's just randomly bringing it up. So we're just like, what? It was random.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds a little bit kind of showmanship. Like he was trying to. He was making a point that didn't need to be made, because everyone, I mean, assuming that people who were in the room all had sight, they could probably tell that there were 2 Black women in the room. It's I think when non-Black people state the obvious like that, that's kind of one of those little warning signs for me of like, why are you saying this right now? Is it because you're trying to show yourself in a certain way as like being aware, or, and it oftentimes will come off in the wrong way. It'll come off as disingenuous. And like you're saying, Jasmine, it'll make people of color, and especially Black women in that situation, feel really uncomfortable, because it's putting the spotlight in a bizarre way.
Yep.
I really appreciate also, Jaya, what you were saying about being active and doing it in a timely manner. And that was all of you, Jen as well, pieces of what you were sharing all came through in the 26 Black women who answered the survey that we received. So there was over 81% who said when misogynoir happens on LinkedIn, they want anyone who sees it to do something, to report that misogynoir post, whether it's an image or whether it's language, report it to LinkedIn, do something about it. Say in the post comments, that's inappropriate, that's rude. We don't tolerate, whatever you can come up with, do it. To be silent, if we all see something is causing harm to Black women and we're all sitting there, we all see it or are aware of it and do nothing, that can be extremely damaging to Black women. And a lot of times non-Black people might think like, oh, well, I'm not the only one who saw it. Someone else saw that. Someone else is going to say something. But that doesn't happen. That group mentality doesn't end up working. There's a bystander effect that the more people who see it, the less likely any one person is going to be intercepted. But also, just over 50%, or excuse me, just under 50% of Black women who answered this survey said that they would like somebody who's attempting allyship to reach out to them and ask them if they want support, if they want anyone to stand in solidarity, and if so, how. So there's some really great information that's come from the survey. It's in the resource guide that you all will have access to. The last thing that I'll just say on this point that we heard from Black women in the survey is that there are different ways in which people can step up or act. I'm trying to not use ableist language. Excuse me. I keep using things like step up, but to act. And for those of us who are not Black, we probably were never taught how to do this. We're gonna mess up. We're gonna mess up a lot. And the thing that's so important is that when we receive corrective feedback from Black women or other Black people, we need to calm ourselves so we can stay focused on the feedback that we're being given. So then we can change our behavior. Too often what happens is we become really threatened and freaked out of like, I screwed up, I'm not perfect, whatever. And that forces the attention from the injury that just happened to the Black woman onto ourselves. So we know for sure that we should not do that. If we are lucky enough that a Black woman has taken the time to tell us where we might have gone wrong, that's a gift. And we don't want to run, we don't want to flee, but we do want to take that feedback. Sorry, I'm not supposed to be on this panel. I'm supposed to be a panel moderator. Excuse me. Let's move to the next question, shall we?
Can I come back to something that Jen and Jade both said that really resonated with me. It really hit home. And it's that I think that one thing that is like a thread that gets lost around this topic a lot is that idea of collective responsibility or collective ownership that we often, too often, I see Black women getting left high and dry. And so it's like it's like you see someone being attacked or having to defend themselves, and you know it's wrong. You know what's happening is wrong. And it's like kind of not having that, like moral, it's either that moral courage or like conviction in your values to be willing to stand up to it. But also I think that if anything, like I was thinking a lot about this recently with, especially with now that Kamala Harris has now become the nominee for the Democratic Party, like it's made me really reflective of the past 8 years and why did we get to such a like critical point in our democracy. And I think that it's because we've lost a lot of sight, at least in American culture and society, about what it means to focus on the collective and like collective well-being. And so why do we leave Black women high and dry? Why do we not care for one another? And, I think there's like a bigger answer or something that we could probably unravel in that. But I think specifically for this conversation, it's like, what your values are, when you see something wrong happening. So it's really about living in alignment with your values. So if I see something wrong happening, or I see someone being, whether it's verbally, definitely physically assaulted, but verbally assaulted, I'm going to speak up. I'm going to say something. If I know something wrong is happening, that's, in line with my values to live with integrity and to live with courage, regardless of whatever, privilege I may lose ground on. Because it's the right thing to do. And I think that we all know those things. Like, everybody here, I assume is an adult on this LinkedIn Live. I don't think they're kids on this LinkedIn Live, and so, I think that that's really important to kind of like wrap our heads around collectively for anybody who's on this call. It's like, we all have a responsibility to create safe spaces for each other. So thanks for saying that, Jade and Jen. I appreciate it.
Would anyone else like to reflect on anything that you've heard so far?
You just made me think about like the breaking of white supremacy in those moments is like, it seems like so critical, because often it seems like Black women, and I'm going to ask the two of you if you want to respond to this or not, but it seems like what often happens is that we break the moment of like, okay, that I didn't like that thing, but also we're leaving the person to just have a reaction that they are allowed to have, right, in public, versus really breaking apart what has happened in that moment. And maybe there's a different emotional response we could have to each other. And maybe that Black woman doesn't have to be super strong in that moment, because we've broken something more than just saying, I don't like that thing or whatever. And I see that happening more and more. And mostly this is led by Black women who are breaking the moments and having different emotional experiences in them. This maybe isn't a good example, but I think perhaps it is. Simone Biles is such a great example of that, breaking apart everything about mental health, about what it means to be an athlete, about what it means to be committed, about all of that, and just busting it open. And it's just given so much permission for a different kind of experience to emerge.
Thank you.
I'm really glad that you brought up Simone Biles, because I actually want to say something about that. She's been receiving extreme misogynoir throughout the whole competition at the Olympics. When it comes to her hair, the way that people talk about that, she just Michaela Skinner, another Olympic gymnast, she got online, I think yesterday, because she said something really bad about the U.S. gymnastics team, saying they were lazy, they might not win the gold medal. So when Simone and the team won, she spoke up online and said something. And now Michaela is trying to weaponize Simone and talking about, well, you're a mental health advocate and you're supposed to protect everybody. Why aren't you protecting me? Like, my family's getting all these threats and stuff now. Even though Michaela was the first person who said something and started the bullying, now she's trying to spin this back on Simone and gaslight her. And a lot of that happens in the workplace towards Black women. When we speak up about something, the tears, the white women tears start. No offense against you, but the white women tears, they start with that, and it's very frustrating. And I hate the gaslighting that's going on. She really doesn't deserve that.
Thank you for saying that, Jasmine. I see, Jade, you've turned on your mic.
Yeah, because I completely agree with what you shared about Simone, Jasmine. Thank you so much for that, because it's true. She's getting hit from all sides. And I also noticed the incident with Michaela. And I think that what was interesting was the choice of words that was used. Lazy, not effortless, which is the word that I would maybe come up with, that, in watching this amazing team, it looks effortless maybe, but laziness and all the other disparaging things, these are all essentially just tropes. And we hear them recycled over and over again. So she was really just placing her between two different motifs there's really only 5 for Black women that exist. We have to exist within these 5 very specific boxes. And if you step out of those 5 specific boxes, you have what's called an expectancy violation, and you are going to pay some kind of penalty or price or cost. And so for Simone, I think that was, now we have to get into the mammy mode mentality. Now I'm supposed to be comforting Michaela. I'm supposed to be standing up for her, giving up my life, essentially my life force for hers. And when you don't feed into that role, then there's the backlash that continues to come with it. But I'm glad that she's stayed firmly on her square about her hair, about her role, about her husband, about where she sees herself and her existence and the role she plays in this country and in this world.
Thank you for adding that, Jade. And for people who are not educated on Black history in the United States, are not in relationships with Black people, one of the clear messages that came through the 26 respondents to our survey was that we really need to educate ourselves about Black history in the United States and start meaningful relationships with Black people that are non-harmful towards Black people. And the reason why is because, for many reasons, but one of them is when you hear the term white tears, if you don't know the history of how white women's emotions have been weaponized against Black women in ways that have led to Black women being murdered, you won't understand the weight of as soon as white women start to release tears in public. It sends, for many Black women, a visceral bodily reaction that there is a lack of safety, that very quickly the institutional power, whether it's in an employment situation or in a healthcare system or with law enforcement, that systemic racism will come in and very quickly people become extremely unsafe. Black people in particular become extremely unsafe. But if you don't know this history, then you hear white tears. Well, it just sounds like another thing. So I just want to continuously bring in the feedback from the women who completed our survey, because I think it's relevant in those ways. Okay, let's go to the next question, if that's okay with folks. We'll start off this time back to Jasmine again, and we'll go to Jaya and then Jen and then Jade again. So this question, Jasmine, what types of actions to interrupt misogynoir are best practices in online spaces? So what?
I think one of the things that you said earlier about, for example, like if you see something on LinkedIn and it's really a derogatory comment, you should report it. Definitely report it, because not doing anything at all is kind of like you're speaking up for it in a way. So doing your part in either trying to get the comment taken down or at least speaking out about it, like I really agree with what was said earlier. I think that's a good way to go.
Thank you, Jasmine. And I'm just, if I can put a plug out for your amazing is it racism and psych and racism art? I'm sorry, I'm messing up the term. You have this incredible training program that uses art to talk about psychiatric racism. And this is an example where you're throughout this training showing how misogynoir shows up in medicine, shows up in the media, and intercepting it with your art. So I'm so grateful that you started off there with that answer. Let's go to Jaya, please. Jaya, what are best practices that you see?
When I see that happening, I will interrupt it. So right away, if I'm seeing it happening, it's not happening and I'm staying quiet. So usually I will be right in those comments. So right in those comments, I will report. Sometimes it's ended up in inboxes. I try to remain firm but respectful because that's just who I am. So I still strive to stay in alignment with who I am. But that's my MO, but I'm not going to be quiet. So because I know and I see every day Black women have more than enough to put up with, both online and offline. So the last thing that I'm going to do is be a person who's just going to be standing by.
Thank you. Jen.
Yeah, I mean, same. I'm going to be in there and I'm going to be saying something. One of the things that I go back to, like, I love what you said earlier. You said about, like, writing to the person and saying, and even if I don't know the person, I may say, hey, I'm gonna do this thing. Here's what I plan to say, and just check it out. I might do that. If it's something that I feel like I can intervene with and it's not going to bring blowback on the person, then that feels a lot easier, and I will just go forward. But I think that it's really important to think about the blowback that a comment can have, and that often, like, I think I see a lot of white people getting really angry about racism, which we should be angry about racism. But when we get angry like that and then come at somebody, the blowback doesn't really come back on us all the time. It actually hurts the person who's being targeted. And so, like, just really thinking about our emotionality and the words that we use, and being, I think we just really need to know that we can cause some harm if we aren't doing this in a tight way.
Thank you, Jade.
I would say, as someone who has, like, very radical white family members that are like, they don't care who you are, where you come from, what you have going on. If you have something that's remotely racist to say, it's going down hard, okay? And they're not going to stop. I think that that's also kind of expensive. All right. So here's what I'm going to say. Of course, report. Of course, say something. Of course, do all those things. I hope everyone heard me say that, of course. But I don't think that the time, and this is what I've told them as well, the time spent getting into intellectual debates with people who are determined not to understand you is worth the time, right? So I think reaching out to see if the individual is okay, awesome, reporting and maybe saying something if you believe that it will stop the behavior, but the getting into, the philosophy behind the person's thing, it's too much. And those efforts can be so much better used elsewhere. So I would just say, of course, and then temper it with what I was mentioning about don't over intellectualize with people who are determined to upset you, to trigger you, and to burn you out.
Mm-hmm.
Totally agree.
Wow. Yeah, please, Jasmine.
No, I was just saying I really agree with her because I've been there. It's like when you try to have those debates with people and they're just really stuck on not understanding you, it's like talking to a brick wall. Like sometimes it's better not to, I mean, yeah, report it. Like she said, it's not like you're not supposed to say anything, but sometimes you got to protect your mental health and just like exit out the conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think that that's like spot on. It's that tempering. It's that, like staying in the middle, like living like as who you are, like keeping like, I think, a cool head, knowing that they're committed to misunderstanding you. They are committed to like this line of attack. And no, like this is like their purpose was to get on and troll. Their purpose was to get on and cause harm and hurt the person that they're targeting at that moment. Like they're going to do this again and again. And so it's really about, I think, focusing more on, you're here to support the person that they're trying to cause harm to. In that case, you might be in the comment interrupting harm towards a Black woman, like you do that in a measured way, like Jade was saying. But it's like you have to be in this for the long term. Allyship is not like a one and done, like once this election cycle's over, we can like hang up our hat and we're good. Like allyship is this lifelong journey. We're constantly dismantling the way white supremacy is embedded into our behaviors or into our thought patterns and processes and how it harms Black women. And so this is something that you have to measure yourself in, and you have to be intentional and judicious in how you use that energy. So I like that you brought that up.
I appreciate all of what each of you have said. This has really like taken my thinking in like some different ways. And I would add that one of the nice things about LinkedIn is if you start to develop a community of anti-racist people that you're connected with on LinkedIn, you can also do what Michelle Simon and I do, which is, she'll see something and she'll message me on the side. She's really good at reporting to bad behavior to LinkedIn. And in our guide, we actually give you the steps of how to do that. But in addition to reporting it herself, then she'll send me a message on the side. Hey, Eliana, will you go over there and do something? And I'll go in and I'll do one message. And it's like a 1-2, between the two of us. So having a group of other people that you can quickly put out a message, that also can create a different kind of energy in the comments of a post. When there are multiple people who are just coming in and saying, that's racist. That's all you have to say, and then leave it. And then just don't go back to it. And you can turn off notifications so you won't get drawn back in. I think in 2024, if we could all stop arguing with bots, that might be a good way to go, because, some of this actually, they are bots. And so putting in one comment that is really for the benefit, honestly, of Black women who are seeing the misogynoir. It's not that we're going to change that person who posted the misogynoir image. I'm not going to change their opinion, but we are sending a message to Black women. We recognize this is wrong, and we want to be in solidarity with you. So maybe also how we engage and for what reason. Anyone else want to say anything before we move on to the next question? All right. The next question then is, given increasing vitriol in this country, how and when should a non-Black person speak up or not if safety is a concern? And going back to what Jen had mentioned before, especially for people who are white or who have white privilege, the point that however we act can bring danger and violence, not just on us, but really more danger and violence on a Black woman. So given the increasing vitriol in this country, how and when should a non-Black person speak up or not if safety is a concern? And we'll go to Jasmine, please.
How should they speak up in what situation? What's the scenario?
So let's maybe take it to the office place, because on LinkedIn, it's typically not like an immediate risk or hazard of someone's safety, but maybe in an office place or maybe in community. If you're going to if you're in community somewhere, walking along, and then somebody says or does something, if safety is a concern, how and when should a non-Black person speak up?
So the first thing that comes to mind with me is Dr. Candia Bailey. When she ended her life because she was bullied so bad at that college, not enough people spoke up for her. In that sense, people really should have said something. They really should have rallied behind her, because if they would have, she might have still been with us today. That was an absolute tragedy. And the fact that that happened, and it really rubbed me the wrong way, just knowing that she did not have a lot of people to speak up, and like other people were also taking a part in bullying her as well. So somebody should have spoken up. In other situations, I think it depends on the degree of how serious it is and if the person wants you to speak up for them.
Mm. Mhm. Thank you, Jasmine. Jaya, we'll go to you next, please.
I think that this question, it's like kind of become a little complex for me at least, and it's a little bit also based on where I live. So like within the workplace, it's not a complex question. So in the workplace, it's, I've had the, you know, positionality to be able to speak up when I see it happening, to be able to stand by people when I know something wrong is taking place, when I know that Black women are being systemically targeted. And for that, I'm going to unapologetically advocate for them. When I have data at my hands, I'm going to use it. And I'm going to, build as much of a case as I can to be able to advocate for the right thing. And if that, has some sort of personal consequence to me, meaning that, that place no longer is the right fit for me or I have to move on, so be it, but that's part of me living in alignment with my values. And that's why I'm in this work. I'll say that, for me, it's been a little bit, just being honest, it's been a little bit challenging for me, especially since I moved to Washington. I grew up in Washington, D.C., but I live in the other Washington now. So I live in the Seattle area. And I have found, particularly around the election cycle, that harassment and, anger, especially like white rage, tends to uptick. And I have to contend with it a lot more personally when I'm alone. So like on a personal level, my own personal safety also kind of is something that I balance in the mix too. But so that becomes a little more complicated, especially if I have my kids with me. And so it's like I'm balancing all of those things in the mix. But if, say, like I'm in like my local Fred Meyer, which is my grocery store, which for some reason is a hotbed of harassment. I don't know why, like, tell me. But usually if there's somebody there where I see something going down or happening that's inappropriate, like I'm going to use the resources that are around me. Like I don't see that as an opt-out. If like I'm being clear, like it's like I can use the community resources that are around me. It's not like this, oh, because, I'm going through this personal challenge myself, like that means that I get out of jail free card. It means that I need help to help this other person. So it's about like when like Jade and Jen were talking about, like we have a collective responsibility. It's like making people aware, like, hey, you have a collective responsibility too. Like, and I can't do this alone. So I need your help to help this person. And so that's how I would approach it personally. It was a little bit of a long-winded answer, so I apologize.
That was perfect. Thank you. Jen, not perfect, terrific.
Well, I feel like I'm sounding like I'm equivocating when that's really not how I'm operating in the world. But I think these questions are not simple. I think what's missing in this is relationship and connection. And if white people, I'm just going to say this about white people, if white people were doing anti-racist work and doing the unlearning that we need to do and doing all of that and listening and following the leadership of Black and brown and indigenous people and Black women in particular in the workplace, if we were doing that, we would be able to form more relationships with the Black people around us and have Black people in our lives in a real way, rather than here's a Black woman who works with me and I don't really have a relationship with her, but now something's happened and I'm trying to intervene and maybe I messed up. But really this is about like undoing everything that's happened to us and the way that we think about the world and the way that we've been taught to think about the world, and breaking that. We have to break ourselves. We have to break ourselves first. And that doesn't mean I ignore racism. I'm going to step in, but it does mean that I'm really aware that I have seen white people do things in situations, and I've been one of those white people who's done a thing in a situation where it didn't help. It did not help. It put a target on this person in a way that I can't take it off of them. And what I can do, though, is undo my own stuff, be in genuine relationship with people and understand them and have them understand me and have us be like we're actually working together because we have a relationship.
Thank you. Jade.
I think the biggest thing here really is that people overestimate that we live in a safe country. It's the most bizarre thing to me. Like, if you look at the Global Peace Index, I think what they rate countries based on their safety levels. Some of the smartest people on the planet collectively come up with this. I think Canada is 11, the UK is like 35, and America is like 136 or something. Okay.
Wow.
It's not a safe country. I think that's the first thing people need to really understand and admit, is that we live in a very violent country that is more violent than certain places in the world that are in active wars. And so when we think about safety, I don't even think for many of us, and I'm talking about myself here too, I don't even think for many of us, we even have the concept of what safe environments actually look like. I mean, we're scared to go to movie theaters. We're scared if we hear something at work, people are getting under their desks. My kid has to do an active shooting drill, and we had an active shooter warning that took place, and he had to hide in his classroom. We don't live in a safe country. We live in an extremely violent country. So if we think about incursions on each other and what leads up to a lot of the violence that we see, the workplace violence is off the chart. Suicide is off the chart. It's the highest we've ever seen across the board ever since they started looking at it. Meaning we've gone through actual wars, had people come back, and the suicide rate has not been nowhere near what it is today. So I think we need to change the entire way that we view safety and thinking that we're in a safe place, and being duped into thinking that we're in a safe space, because we're not. We're in such a violent situation. We shouldn't even be doing warnings to visit other countries. Literally. So I think having that understanding and saying, I'm in a situation that is a tinderbox situation, that changes how we think about reporting things. That changes how we think about co-regulating with one another and being someone for someone in a certain period of time, how we're looking at changes in behavior with people that we care about or are in community with, to really bring this home. The level of violence, the collective trauma that we're all going through. It is not normal to hear a sound and want to get under your desk. It is not normal to be afraid to go to a parade. It is not normal for people to know multiple people who have committed suicide in a year's time. So if we can get out of that frame of mind, I think so much can happen for protecting one another. That's maybe part of the unlearning that Jen was mentioning about community and relationship. I really think we need to take the rose-colored glasses off that we're safe, because we're actually in one of the most dangerous countries on the planet.
Thank you for that. I am reminded of Dr. Cornel West and Black Men Who Mean Business have an album that came out sometime in the mid-90s. It was called Never Forget, A Journey of Revelations. And in this album, there is a song about 9/11. And Dr. West talks about how right after 9/11 happened, that a proportion of white people were saying, oh my gosh, other people in the world don't like us. They hate us. They would want to attack us. And he is saying the experience for many, if not most or all Black people in America, is from the beginning of life in this country, feeling hated and being unsafe. And so I really appreciate what you were just saying, Jade, that there's the positionality, and Jaya also talked about this, of like, it makes a difference. I also really appreciate what you were saying just now, Jade, about the nervous system and our own regulation. One of the greatest resources that I have found in terms of nervous system regulation and anti-racism is the work of Dr. Resmaa Menakem, his somatic abolitionisms. And he has an online platform called Black Octopus Society, where he does these trainings for people that are explicitly about helping us to develop more capacity with our nervous system, so we have more flexibility to respond like we want to, like we need to respond in any given moment. We can calm ourselves down when that is needed so that we don't add more gasoline to a fire, or we can upregulate very quickly if we need to fight or flee to get ourselves or others to safety. So having the ability to kind of move our nervous system like that in response to what's in front of us is really important. And so many of us, again, to your point, Jade, that we have such high trauma in this country across the board. Most of us have nervous systems by this point in 2024 that are really on the crispy side of the spectrum. And so it can be very hard for us when we hear that sound going off, we're jumping under our desk.
Yes. Yeah.
So that Black Octopus Society, Dr. Resmaa Menakem's work, he wrote My Grandmother's Hands. These are resources that are also linked in the resource guide. I want to pause and just invite if anyone else would like to comment on something else that you've heard here.
I really appreciate the suicide rates being brought up, especially the fact that this society is very dangerous, because even with the suicide rates being so high, the suicide prevention resources that we have are even like not safe for people. They are extremely linked to the criminal justice system. Like I deal with depression, anxiety, PTSD. There have been times where I just really needed help and I have been really criminalized in this system. So I think another reason why the suicide rates are so high is because the suicide prevention resources are terrible. They're trash.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yes.
Agree. Absolutely agree with that. And the history behind it that we have to contend with institutionally. And also the incentivizing of that criminalizing, but also the incentivizing you have to lock people up. Because we can talk all night about the incarceration rates being the highest again on the planet. I mean, so it's just it is a quagmire that we are really in here. It is.
I appreciate you saying that, Jade, and that the work that Jasmine has done with the Safe Place app is this brilliant alternative that is provided. It's free for folks. If you haven't seen it, there's a link in the resource guide. Jasmine, would you actually share with us a little bit about the Safe Place app, please? Is that okay for me to put you on the spot?
Sure, that's fine. So the Safe Place app, as I said in the beginning, is a mental health app for the Black community. And we teach how racism impacts the mental health of the Black community. And the reason I created this resource in the first place is because I've been a patient in this system and I have felt really criminalized. Every time I've gone to get help, either I've been restrained, which I don't know if people know this, but Black people are 85% more likely to be restrained in a mental health crisis than any other race. We are the most over-policed when it comes to mental health. We just had another Black woman, Sonia, be killed by the police just because she was schizophrenic. She was in a crisis. All she had was a pot of boiling water and he shot her. So just with those kind of things going on in the world and knowing that Black people don't have really safe mental health resources, that's why I created the Safe Place app.
It's beautiful.
Thank you for sharing that, Jasmine. When I was working at Veterans Affairs and sharing it with Black veterans, way before I'd even met you, they were saying how powerful it was that they could access quotes by Black people that are inspirational. They could get into conversation with others about police violence. They could talk to other Black people, about stigma in some Black churches, like that you have so many places where community is being built so that people can be sharing with one another in those moments where those other systems are not safe. And so there's resource within Black communities. And I'm seeing people in the chat here who are going to be, Bree saying, downloading it. Please, everyone, please do download this app. And I think for people who are like, well, wait, I thought we were talking about how to interrupt misogynoir. And what does that have to do with suicide prevention? It has everything to do with suicide prevention. Everything. Because anyone, if our nervous systems become overwhelmed to the point that we can't fight or flee effectively from an aggressive situation, any one of us can have ultimately a suicidal crisis. And it can happen like that quickly. So when Black women who currently have the highest rate of suicide of all women, ages 18 to 65 in the United States, but we're not hearing about it in the media. Like, why is this not in the media? Misogynoir, anti-Blackness and sexism combined. When we speak up, it's one little drop in that larger pool that is boiling already, but it's one drop to help to cool it down a little bit. And the part of the brain that registers social rejection and ostracization and discrimination is the same part of the brain that registers physical pain. And so we have to be constantly, intentionally sending messages to Black women that we see the pain that Black women are experiencing, and we're going to interrupt it whenever we can, and want feedback and are willing and going to act on feedback in a meaningful way. I might have gone on a tangent there. Jen, I see you.
I think that misogynoir is the central, that along with colonization are the two central power systems really that this country is based on, because everything really grows out of that. I mean, all of the stuff that we're talking about now around gender and whether or not that all stems from this beginning where it was really important to make white women be associated with white men, to make sure that Black women were basically objects and to be used in any way, shape, or form that white men and white women wanted. And all of everything that we are experiencing in this country comes from this. So it has to be our focus. It has to be a way that we are thinking about this is a root. This is the place that where we really have to get at this. And that's why I keep talking about breaking things apart. To white therapists, one of the things that I think about all the time is the process of like when somebody is suicidal and they're so scared to tell you because of the whole institution. And if we really going to a harm reduction and really like going based on this person's strengths and building on that versus like just immediately going to, I've got to like, it just works so much better to be working with this person who often just wants some pain to end and doesn't actually want to die. They just want a thing to stop happening. And sometimes it gets to the place where it seems like death is the best way.
Thank you for saying that so explicitly, that it's about making pain stop, not necessarily about death. And so if we can connect people to community-based crisis centers, emergency room is not the only option. 911, 988, not the only options. There are phone numbers that we can call that do not involve law enforcement. So law enforcement are overwhelmingly not trained to deal with mental health crises, and they have weapons, and they are overwhelmingly traumatized themselves. And so they show up and their nervous systems are off the chart, and that's how so many Black people are dying. And so instead of calling in somebody who is not trained and has a weapon and is traumatized, we can instead call mobile crisis units, oftentimes with people who have lived experience of mental health challenges, as well as licensed social workers and psychologists and so on. And we can go to community-based crisis recovery centers that are low restrictive, so people won't be locked up and then having to deal with the systemic racism in those healthcare systems. These resources are all in that resource guide that we've put together for this event. as well. Any other final comments from our panelists before we go to the questions that are from our audience?
I just wanted to say one more thing. So my app, the Safe Place app, does have a suicide prevention resource inside. It is a chat feature. It is free, and also we do not contact the police under any circumstance. So I just also wanted to put that out there.
Thank you. And yeah, check out these amazing interviews of Jasmine. They're on my LinkedIn page, where Jasmine is talking about a variety of different issues that were part of a larger Black Women Toxic Job Suicide Prevention series. So I'm so grateful to you, Jasmine, that you bring this expertise in here. Okay, so let's go to some questions from the audience. There's a little bit of a delay between when comments are placed in LinkedIn and when we can see them here in StreamYard. So if anyone on the panel sees a question that you want to get into, please just cut me off. I'm seeing a couple of questions. So Heidi has just posted, I got the link to the resource guide, but I couldn't download it. Is there a link to access it outside LinkedIn? Yes, we will get that for you, Heidi. Let's see. Let me get to some of the questions that have to do with the content here. Okay, so somebody has put a comment about how Black women don't get to have moments of weakness. You are seen as a failure. So and this is a comment, I'm wondering if we might talk a little bit about, and start with Jasmine and Jade, if you would, for people who are not Black, how can people who are not Black help to create environments that are safer for Black women to be human, to not have to be super women, to not have to be responsible for caring for everybody, and who can have the full range of emotions that other people are allowed to have in public?
I think one of the first things people need to understand that the strong Black woman trope is rooted in racism and misogynoir. And we are always expected to do everything for everybody. It's like we have to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. And I actually really, I'm glad somebody asked this question, because I've experienced this myself. When I first got diagnosed with depression, I was either 19 or 20 years old, and I didn't really come to terms with what was going on with me until I was like 26, because I had been taught my whole life that Black people don't go through depression. Black women are supposed to be strong, just pray. Like, when we hear all these things, it's really teaching us to like keep our trauma and everything inside of us. So allowing us to speak our feelings and listening to us to understand and not to respond, and understanding that using the word strong can be very triggering to some of us. Like, I'm to the point, I don't even want people to call me strong anymore. I really resent the word in so many ways, because it's just been used against Black women in such disgusting ways. And I just don't even want to associate myself with it anymore. So I really want people to understand that you have to allow Black women to feel, and not be upset with us for not wanting to, take on everybody else's problems when we're not even taking care of ourselves. A lot of us are always on empty. Like, we're so busy pouring into everybody else, and we're on empty all the time.
Thank you. Please, Jade.
I would say too that a lot of this has to do with really educating yourself about what Black women actually have to carry. I don't think that's really understood. I think we say it, but we don't really understand the level of hypervigilance that goes into having to protect your family. Like, I'm married to a larger Black man. I can't just have him show up anywhere. Okay. There has to be preparation. All right. I have to make sure that this is an environment where he's not going to be humiliated. So I'm doing research ahead of time. We have to do that for our brothers. We do it for our fathers. We're always out in front. And this typically starts very young. So there's a hypervigilance that extends beyond the woman just kind of focusing on getting her own self through, and having to deal with other tentacles of the community that you're a part of to protect them as well. The number one thing a Black woman can do that is nearly unforgivable in the Black community, and there's not a lot because we're a very forgiving people, is having a Black male harmed because you didn't do your due diligence. And so those types of failures, those types of penalties and intra-punishment can in certain ways be even more profound than what we're dealing with externally, closer to home, more difficult to anticipate. So think about the anticipation you have to be able to have to think ahead for your son not getting into the prison pipeline from school from the moment he's born, to making sure that your husband can stand in a hospital room, which was for me. They were very concerned about his positioning and where he was standing. So now I have to go through labor concerned about that. So think about all the different inflection points that someone would have to worry about, given that level of hypervigilance that you have to have. And then the entire family having to be hypervigilant. So now you have to deal with that as well. So while you're protecting them, there's also that additional component. And it's just stress going back and forth and forth and back with no ceasing. When you think about it in that type of a context, you can understand why we have some of the rates of health complications, and why so many of us are, I'm losing friends at 40 years old, literally from stress-related, blood pressure-related issues. When you think about it to that extent, I think it gives folks the opportunity to have some value as to what real rest might mean in a specific space. So that would be my thought. Dig deeper into what the reality is. That helps us to be able to come up with the appropriate space to have actual rest.
Thank you for that. It's reminding me, if people who are not Black, who are here, who want to learn more about some of the topics that are being raised, what Jade was just referring to with this weathering that happens from daily racial stress in the workplace and healthcare systems and education and so on. We know that daily, what they're called microaggressions, but they don't oftentimes feel very micro, those daily insults, slights, underhanded comments especially, are actually even more damaging than the outright explicit racism, because the extra energy that's required to have to decipher whether or not they really meant that, what did I just pick up in what I was hearing in their voice, tone of voice, or what have you, it causes over time a stress reaction that leads to system-wide inflammation and brings on early stress-related illnesses of diabetes, heart disease, cancer, obesity, so many different health-related issues, and it shortens the lifespan of people of color, and especially Black people, when there is anti-Blackness everywhere. It's ubiquitous. It's in all of the systems. And so if you are interested in learning more about this book called Weathering by Dr. Arlene Geronimus is a great place to get some information. Anyone else before moving on to another question or comment in the chat? Okay, let's see here. So we've got somebody who is saying, wow, there's a lot of questions in here. Thanks, everybody. Okay, so let's see. Somebody has said, uncover and address root causes, abuse, racism, anger issues, bias, generational trauma. Yes. Oh, that generational trauma, that is a piece that I feel like we oftentimes don't talk about enough when we think about the nervous system and how we respond or don't respond to racism. So I wonder if anyone would like to talk about generational racial trauma and how you see it interacting with this issue of interrupting misogynoir. Please, Jade.
I can start us off, because I think one thing that's really interesting about generational trauma is that, it doesn't just belong to Black people. There's no way that the type of atrocities that have taken place had no effect on white people. There's no way. It's too heinous, it's too disturbing, it's too upsetting. Energetically, is impossible. And so when we talk about generational trauma, there's effects that are almost codependent. When you have people who have had to live in such close proximity and in such an interdependent way, no matter how you kind of think about it, there was that interdependence that existed. I think it has to be something where it's healed from a collective standpoint, kind of like what we're doing today. There, of course, is the individual level, but there's also, I think, that collective shared, those shared opportunities that we don't take as often as I think that we should, and getting past or trying to heal some of these generational wounds.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to take this? Yeah.
So I think I have more of like maybe a parallel, but it's connected to what Jade just shared, that, I think that across cultures and across different communities, you see the experience of generational trauma for different reasons or different events. So, for example, like my family experienced generational trauma due to the partition of India and Pakistan. And so that's something that they still acutely feel. And I'm 2 generations removed from the survivors of that. And so, I think that there are some similarities between what are some of the impacts of that, and that can be kind of like for a longer discussion, kind of explored and shared. But I think what is similar is that there's this pervasiveness of some of the impacts that are experienced, where I think that especially with generational trauma, it's something that almost seeps into the collective consciousness. And it's something that becomes almost like such a part of your being and it's passed down from generation to generation to generation. It almost has this way of physically rewiring you. So you do have this natural state of hypervigilance. That's something that I've noticed in my own family, from grandmother to mother to me, just this natural state of just greater hypervigilance, higher startle response, even more issues with physical health, like cardiovascular, high blood pressure, anxiety, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that those are some commonalities that are experienced across generational trauma. I think some of the challenges we experienced, and we're kind of pulling it back to Misogynoir, is that there's almost no opportunity for respite. There's no opportunity to breathe or to stop or to think about it, because it's so, first of all, ingrained into the collective consciousness. And I think that's a big similarity between, the situation that my family experienced, but also I think that what many Black women have shared that they've experienced. But there's almost no opportunity to process that and to unpack it so that we can have the ability to just speak it out loud, say it out loud, talk about it. And I found, even through, processing the generational trauma from my side, that putting words to it has a lot. It releases some sort of emotional charge. It helps me to regulate a lot more and regulate my own nervous system a lot more. And we just don't have that opportunity because, especially within this country, it's, almost like we're just constantly in survival mode. And I think that that's even more the case for Black women and the demands that are put on Black women internally within the communities. And Jade, thank you for sharing that. And externally as well, and the demands we put on them. So,
thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on this?
So my answer is short, but Black women being in harm in this country is generational. So to quote Malcolm X, Black women are the most disrespected, the most unprotected in America. And we have never really been allowed to express our feelings or even get the mental health support that we need, because another generational thing in the Black community is not really being able to receive the proper mental health care that we need. Also because of not just racism, but also not having the resources provided in our communities. Like, I just remember as a little girl, I didn't really hear much about mental health. Like, my uncle was in the Vietnam War and he had PTSD, and I didn't find that out until I was nearly 30 years old. So it's just like really not talked about. And I feel like it was really important to bring this up because this conversation is talking about how we can support Black women more. Well, a lot of Black women need therapy resources. And it's just been generational that we have not been afforded the opportunity. And a lot of people don't listen to what we have to say. And we have a lot of stress, a lot of disorders come from it, like heart disease, stroke, heart attack. It's so many things that happen to us because nobody is listening to our pain. So something needs to be done about the generational trauma of Black women not being able to receive the proper health care that we need because of the way we're treated in this country.
Ooh, thank you for that. Absolutely. And that really came through in the surveys that we received from Black women, that people kept saying, listen to us. Listen to us. If you would just stop and listen to understand, not listen to respond. And then secondarily, there are so many physical and mental health indicators of the unrelenting stress from misogynoir in society. And so that when we listen and we witness, then we need to turn around and ensure that if we are part of healthcare systems, like Jen was saying, if we are a mental health provider, or if we are an MD, or if we're a nurse, we need to be looking and seeing how are Black women being treated as they walk through the door, through all of the services until when they leave. And what Jade was sharing, that family members and how family members are treated, that is an issue of the Black woman's experience accessing medical care. They're not separate. We're not separate from our communities. That's one of the things that I think white supremacy has done, and anti-Blackness as well. Because of chattel slavery, people being torn apart from families, there's no respect for those ties. And those ties are what have kept us going over the years in different communities. We see it also with colonization and Indian boarding schools and migrant detention facilities of children and so on. So in so many of our communities, to respect those ties to our family are life-saving when the rest of the world is pulling us down and pulling us apart. Jen, please.
I wanted to pick up where Jade was talking about the collective holding of this trauma. And for white folks, what I really see is that the trauma over generations is that we have been treating people as if they are not human, and that there's no way to stay in our humanity when we continue to treat people as if they don't matter and participate in systems of power and try to seek power in those systems so that they can still treat people as if they don't matter, as if they aren't human. And so I think a lot of times I hear white people doing this thing of like, what about what I'm experiencing? And I'm like, okay, yes, great. What about what you're experiencing? Do something about it, because that's our work, is to do something about that. It's not our work to say to other people who we've harmed for centuries, help me make this better. That's not the work. Yeah. The work is here.
I agree with that. And I think too, to your point, I think really taking history that's been presented to us has not been complete purposefully. And so I don't think that like white people even know where some of this comes from. The lens that they've put onto Europe, juxtaposing it with places like the African continent, the value for a variety of ethnicity and internal conflicts and medieval behaviors, and where some of that ultimately comes from, resource scarcity. None of these things are really examined and shared. So it's kind of like there's this rosy picture. Some of it very true, right? I don't think I'm not trying to take away from, the Enlightenment periods. And so that tends to be the reaction, like,
Mhm.
you know, and I understand that because it could feel like it's something being torn away. But if we don't talk about the whole picture, it's very difficult to place where this actually comes from and juxtaposing it with people who have been harmed and what those systems that were disrupted actually look like. And so we're kind of, without that backstory, we're asking people to do some work that you don't even have a real reality of where you actually come from. You know, we're often told we don't know where we come from. And I often say, you know, if you're a third generation American white person, you might not either, because the history has been so covered up and rose colored. And so without that deeper dive analysis, it's difficult to do.
I really appreciate you bringing that up, Jade. In the resource guide, we have, there's a video of Dr. Lila June, who is an Indigenous woman. She's mixed race. She's Indigenous and white ancestry as well. And she talks about the history of violence in medieval Europe, as you're describing, and how the exact same torture practices that were used in medieval Europe then show up in chattel slavery and colonization. That the first white people who came to the United States were highly traumatized people who were fleeing extreme amounts of violence. And it is in our bodies. But in addition to that, there's even going back even further than that to the original ancestral origins of white society. There are other racial traumas that are there as well, and resiliencies and wisdoms that have been kept from our knowledge. We can think about Welsh. There's so many, not to go on too long on this, but I'm so grateful that you all have been here for this panel. I'm so grateful for the audience who have put in so many comments. I can't wait to see them. We are at 7:30. I would invite people, if you would please share your thoughts about this event. I've just dropped in the chat a link to a survey. We're going to be doing more of these events. We would love to hear from you. And if you're interested to share your email address and your name, then we'll be sure to invite you to future events that will be more interactive. We'll do them in Zoom. But then secondly, I'm also doing a raffle. One of Dr. Bailey's, so Dr. Bailey is the person who coined the term misogynoir. And she wrote this amazing book about Misogynoir Transformed. And she has graciously given us a discount if we buy in bulk. So I have purchased 10 books and I would like to raffle them off to folks. If you would like to be included in this raffle to access this book, please do complete the survey and put your name and email address in there. And if you don't want to be associated with, if you want your answers to be anonymous, that's great. You don't have to put your name or email in there either. We just wouldn't be able to include you in the raffle. But we really, really want to hear from you what worked, what didn't work, how we can improve in the future. Oh my gosh, Jasmine, Jade, Jaya, Jen, you are amazing. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you also to our incredible chat monitors. So Christine and Ruth, thank you. Any final words from the panelists? We can just go one by one here. We'll start with Jasmine. Is there anything that you'd like to conclude on, Jasmine?
I just want to say thank you for having me, and I thought this was an amazing conversation.
Thank you. Jaya, any final comments?
I just felt so grateful to be on this panel with so many intelligent people and just to be able to be in this in-depth conversation with all of you. So thank you for being in community with me tonight.
Thank you, Jaya. Jen.
Yeah, I'm leaving feeling very grateful to have met all of you and to be a part of this. And actually just grateful. I feel grateful to myself and to all the Black women in my life and all the women of color in my life who put up with me probably when they shouldn't have, and but also helped me open myself and become part of a movement that for me, I crossed a line, and that line puts me closer to the people who've been experiencing these atrocities and I'm glad that I crossed that line, and it's just the center of how I feel like we should be going through the world.
Thank you, Jen. Jade?
All right, thank you so much. I'm so happy that we had this opportunity. But I did want to add to Jen that I do think that you absolutely do deserve the time that people have spent either with education or correction. You absolutely do deserve the time. This isn't outside of you. This belongs to you, and so appreciative for the thoughts that you shared. And with that, yeah, I just want to say thank you so much. It's been fantastic meeting you. Jasmine, your app is amazing. I'll be sharing it everywhere that I can. And this has just been phenomenal. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. I'm seeing so many comments from the audience who have really been moved by what you all have shared. And I would like to go out by just saying that I am so grateful to so many Black women who have educated me. I've been lucky to study under Dr. Angela Davis, reading Patricia Hill Collins' work. There are so many great, brilliant Black women intellectuals who have set the course for my entire life. And that's why it's unquestionable for me. Like, no, we have to do this and we have to keep coming back to it. So thank you all so much. And thank you to everyone who has logged in. Please do let us know what worked and what we can change in the future, because we're going to keep going at this. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening. Take care.